I'm an engineering manager at Puppet Labs. I manage a number of teams who are developing Puppet content in the form of Puppet modules. And as you all know, Puppet modules are the way that you manage specific resources in your environment, whether it be applications, files, packages, services, storage devices, network devices, resources in the cloud, or just traditional resources on bare metal servers. So and in that role, I get the opportunity to work with partners and vendors as they build out their integrations with Puppet. And we've got a couple of those folks on stage with us today. Certainly want to get their perspective on what they see as developing trends around emerging technologies, how their companies and their solutions are integrating automation into their business. Talk a little bit about Devops and how they see Devops evolving and the value of Devops, and just really get their perspective on the value of taking and building an integrated solution approach. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to kick it off. I'll kick it off with Mike Coleman. Mike Coleman is a senior technical marketing engineer at Docker, and he is responsible for building out collateral for Docker and their users on the key Docker components. So, Mike, why don't you just tell us a little bit about what you do at Docker, what's your role?
Yeah, so I've been joined Docker earlier this summer, and like you said, I focus on technical marketing, which is really about building out use cases and kind of answering customer questions before they have them. So you want to use Docker with Jenkins. How do you put that together? You want to understand, as you plan your POC, things to think about with regard to storage and how Docker uses storage. And you want to look at building a solution that integrates with other components. How do we do that? Do a lot of work, some work with Puppet, do work with AWS, do work with Microsoft, do work with all kinds of different vendors in that space.
Cool. And just for the benefit of our audience, obviously containers are a super hot topic these days. What are containers?
So essentially, the analogy I use for people is I always start with virtual machine, but they're not a virtual machine. I heard somebody say earlier in one of the sessions, like, well, they need to get the hypervisor something. I mean, there's no hypervisor. They're using functions that have been in Linux for a long time to divide up the operating system, and I compare them to houses versus apartments. So if you think of a virtual machine as a house, right? It's this entity that is fully self-contained. And if I want to run another application, I build another house, right? It's got its own plumbing, it's got its own electrical, it's got its own air conditioning. If you think about a container is more like an apartment building, right? So I'm going to start up I need to move somebody in, I have another apartment. It has its own space and it's isolated, and I don't just walk through your front door of your apartment, but I share air conditioning and I share plumbing and I share some of that infrastructure. It's a lot more lightweight. So they're basically a carved off area in the operating system. You can instantiate a container in sub-second time. I can stand up 1,000 containers in 2 minutes.
As opposed to virtual machines, or?
As opposed to anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes, depending on the VM. So they're orders of magnitude faster.
Okay, cool. What do you see as some of the key trends that are driving interest in containers, and why are containers the hot topic these days?
Yeah, I think Donnie talked about it a little bit in the first session today about this push to microservices and this ability to be more responsive and agile, right? Which is a little a, not big A, but a key DevOps concept is like, how can we be faster and remove friction and kind of push things through quickly? And containers allow you to do a couple of different things. They allow you to break your architecture of your application down into these small blocks of code. So simple example would be something like a website for e-commerce transactions, and I have a login module, and I have a catalog display module, and I have a catalog query module, and those things are all broken up, and you can iterate on them so much more rapidly. We had a customer, ING, a bank, and they were shipping once or twice a year. They were able to ship updates to their app. They redid it in microservices using Docker, and they ship multiple times a day. They can ship new features much more rapidly. You can also use it You think about continuous integration, continuous delivery, and we just talked about virtual machines. And if you build, say, a Jenkins workflow on a virtual machine, and you want to do a scale test, and you want to stand up 100 virtual machines, well, there's just amount of time that it takes for that to happen that isn't there when you move it to containers, and you can just get them up and running so much faster. So you can start decreasing test time cycles, shipping more rapidly, and moving more seamlessly through the organization that way.
What are you seeing now as kind of the most popular use cases?
We talk about 3 use cases at Docker that sort of we look at. The first is CI/CD, which I just sort of spoke to. The second is something I refer to as data proximity. And so if you look at large data sets and large data volumes, data is analyzed differently, use different tools depending on what you want to analyze. So if you are able to deploy those tools inside of containers, you can move them close to the data, and you can and not have to ship data all around the data center, but you can also give people the flexibility to use the right tool at the right time. So I need to use this one tool A, boom, I instantiate it, it takes me a second to do it. I use it, I throw it away, I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah.
The third is people bringing in-house their own sort of platform as a service. So one of the, this balance between infrastructure as a service and platform as a service is this idea of, in a lot of cases, this idea of like, how customized can I get, right? If it's infrastructure, I'm defining everything. If it's platform, I'm kind of getting something you give me, and it may not be exactly what I want. So the idea that you can take and build your own library of containers inside your infrastructure that are exactly what your developers need, and offer that them up as sort of their own container as a service inside your organization. That's sort of the third use case that we look at.
Cool. In terms of roadmap, what are the things that Docker is really focusing on from a product perspective over the next year or so?
I think a lot of it sort of echoes what you've heard this morning in the keynote about orchestration, right? We're working on technologies Compose and Swarm, which basically allow you to define a multi-tier application and say, here's my database, here's my web front end, here's my logic processing in the middle, and architect that out, and being able to plug into something like Puppet Orchestrator, and being able to have Puppet sort of orchestrate using those tools, and those sort of things will be important. The other part too is I was at VMworld a few weeks back, and I did the booth, and I was talking to probably 100 people a day, and also something that came out of this morning Donnie was talking about, which was this idea that developers are coming into IT ops folks, and they're saying, hey, I just built this application on Docker, you better figure out how to manage it. You better figure out how to put it at scale. And so tools around that, we talked about something at DockerCon in July that we'll talk more about in the next couple of months, but we call it Project Orca, which is basically how do you build IT enterprise operations around Docker containers so that you can deploy them, manage them, destroy them, and monitor them, as you do with with virtual machines and other sort of infrastructure components. So those two things, orchestration and scale, and then the IT operations are going to be the big things. But then, of course, there's always the underlying infrastructure of just better support for storage, better support for networking, better security. Those sort of things are going on all the time as well.
Where does Docker see automation fitting in, and where do you think that automation can have the most value with respect to containers, whether it be image creation, host configuration management, or automation of the individual images themselves? Where do you think the biggest bang for the buck lies?
I think it depends on how people architect it. I mean, at the most basic level, the module that's out there today for standing up Puppet or Docker hosts and creating Docker instances and pulling down images and running is a great way for people to be able to leverage their Puppet infrastructure and marry that with Docker. So you can write Puppet code today that says, I need a host and I want these images and I'm going to run this Docker file, and I think that's great. I think it was Elise that was just up here before, she was talking about, as you get more immutable, it gets a little fuzzier, and you need to think a little bit harder about the role, where those things overlap. But I think, the larger picture is that, Puppet manages pretty much everything. Like, if you can write a module, you can manage it. Today, we're about Docker files, and they just do Docker images. So the other part of that too is that Puppet, I see Docker as just being another component that Puppet manages in that whole ecosystem.
Yeah, that's kind of a lead into my next question, which is, how do you see Puppet and Docker working together?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is sort of stuff I just touched on, right? Which is how do you manage that environment? How do you manage that infrastructure using the modules like the vSphere module that just shipped? People often ask us, they say, well, what about VMware? And I'm like, I think vSphere and VMware is a great place to run your Docker engines, and you get a lot of benefit from that. I think that the power of Puppet is that it can orchestrate and manage all of that. Right? It can set up the vSphere host, and then it can load the Docker host, and then it can create the Docker containers and pull down the images. And I think that's where the power is for us when we look at Puppet and Docker.
Okay. Certainly DevOps is a hot topic these days. How can containers accelerate some of the core principles of DevOps? Whether it be speeding up deployment, infrastructure as code, quick iteration. What do you think from a DevOps perspective containers can really have an impact on?
I think we hadn't really talked about infrastructure as a code, but when one of the concepts that kind of befuddles people when they think about containers is that that's really what it is, right? You write a Docker file, and that digital artifact that you've created is basically your operating system, all your dependencies and your libraries, and the application code to make that service run. And everything you need is self-contained there, and it's all described in a Docker file. And so you put that up in Git, and you version control it a lot the same ways you handle your Puppet code, right? And allows people then to start defining code and versioning it and running it, and then out of this code becomes this digital artifact that actually just runs. I think that's pretty powerful. We talked about some of the other things, enabling more seamless CI/CD workflows because of we talked about the speed, but the other part of it is removing all the dependencies, right? So if I want to do a Jenkins job and I need it's a Java-based app, I don't really care as far as Docker is concerned, right? I just have an Ubuntu box or a Red Hat box sitting there, and it's running Docker, and that's all it needs. Because when that Docker container comes over, it has all of that. It's a Node app, or it's a Go app, or it's a whatever app. So you start abstracting up and making it really, like I said, removing the friction in there.
Great. Well, thanks, Mike.
Yep.
Certainly appreciate your perspective. I want to turn it over to Chris Wells. Chris Wells is a product owner at Red Hat. He's got responsibility for overseeing all of the satellite business. So Chris, tell us what your role is and what you do at Red Hat.
Oh, thank you very much for having me here. So at Red Hat, one of the things that, if I say the word Red Hat, we played a game of word association, most of you would probably instantly say Linux, and that obviously is our flagship product, but over the last few years, we've expanded our product lines. And as a product owner, I look after one of our product lines, which is known as Red Hat Satellite. Satellite's our systems management solution for managing Red Hat products, everything from provisioning out systems, doing the patch management, the software management of those life cycles, configuration management, all those types of things is what Satellite does. And because Red Hat, being an open source company, we take various open source projects and put them into our commercial products, and one of the projects that we take advantage of is Puppet, which is what we leverage for our configuration management.
Cool. Yeah, like you said, Puppet and Satellite have been shipping together for a long time now. How have you seen your customers' automation requirements evolve over time since you first started shipping Satellite to what you're hearing and experiencing in the field now?
Well, when we take a look at the Satellite product line, it's kind of it's going through kind of a major change in its life right now, if you will. I mean, we've had the product line available for well over a decade. And most people, would standardly use Satellite because they wanted to build out a set of new Red Hat Enterprise Linux systems, be able to provision them out, update them, those kinds of things. And we realized a couple years ago that we really needed to basically re-architect, re-platform the system because so much has changed over the last 10 years. So when you talk about automation, 10 years ago when we did the first version of Satellite, you didn't have virtualization, you didn't have cloud, you didn't have containers or any of those kinds of technologies, and Satellite really didn't know how to handle those things, so we had to go through and re-platform it, and we did that when we introduced Satellite 6 last fall. And one of the things we had to do is we had to look at configuration management and automation types of requirements because that was something that people wanted to have in their system. They wanted to be able to not only just manage the underlying operating system, but the applications on top of it. How do I take multi-tier applications and tie them together? How do I take other parts of the infrastructure, not just the the operating system, but storage, network, and all those things. How do you tie all those things together? And that would naturally led us down the path to Puppet, to start looking at how do we bring that in from a configuration and automation type of solution.
So I think I'm going to steal a little bit of your thunder here because I think you're going to announce an integration tomorrow. But so yeah, Satellite and Puppet Enterprise we're announcing an integration. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the factors that led to the integration and the solution with Satellite and Puppet Enterprise.
Yeah, definitely talk about that. I mean, today what we have in the Satellite product today is we utilize the open source version of Puppet. And from a Red Hat perspective, we really focus on managing Red Hat infrastructure. So if you've got Red Hat products in your environment, that's what Satellite's going to focus on, managing the life cycle of those. And as much as I would love all of our customers to only have Red Hat stuff, there's this reality that they actually have other things like Microsoft in their environment. They have other operating systems, they have containers, they have other kinds of things. So we realized that. So we sat back and we talked to our customers, and they say, hey, look, we love using Satellite, we love using the Puppet inside of Satellite to manage our Red Hat environment, but we have these other operating systems. There's other flavors of Unix we have, or Linux, or Microsoft, whatever it happens to be. We really want to have one experience, so we started working with the guys from Puppet Labs several months ago. We actually, at our user conference at Red Hat Summit back in June, we actually did a proof of concept demonstration of how you could take Satellite 6 and also Puppet Enterprise and make the two of them work together. And then over the last few months, we've been working out kind of on the engineering side and the support side and everything else, like how do we make that into a formalized offering for both of our joint customers, and that's what we'll be announcing tomorrow. We actually have a presentation where they'll be showing how that integration works together and what that experience will be like for customers.
Great. So I know Red Hat has made a pretty large investment in OpenStack.
Just a little.
Yeah. One of the challenges with OpenStack is that every deployment, to a certain extent, is a custom job. How is Red Hat using automation to better deploy RDO?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you take a look at OpenStack, I mean, by its very definition, it has so many different moving pieces to it, so many different pieces of complexity, and then that also means there's so many different ways that you can actually go through and do the deployment of it. And we've tried lots of different variations to make it happen, and the one that we've most recently standardized is on a technology set inside of what we call the RDO manager. And the RDO manager is how we're doing all of the installation, all the automation, everything to get OpenStack initially deployed, because that seems to be one of the single biggest challenges in the OpenStack world, is just getting the initial infrastructure up and running, in your undercloud, let alone when you actually get the applications put on top of it. But just the initial installation, configuration, all those kinds of things. We spent an awful lot of time putting that tooling together in the RDO manager to be able to make that a lot easier for customers.
And RDO is available with just the Red Hat distribution, right?
Yeah, so RDO is our upstream open source version, and then we commercialize it into RHEL OpenStack platform.
And that's Red Hat?
Red Hat Enterprise Linux OpenStack platform.
Yeah. Okay.
Say that 3 times fast, you get a bonus star.
Cool. What are you hearing from your customers with respect to wanting to automate beyond physical servers and automate configuration of things like storage devices or network devices or
I mean, we hear it a lot. I mean, I would say the vast majority of customers I walk into today, it's all virtualization first. You have to get all kinds of special exceptions in an organization if you want to deploy onto physical hardware. So everything's going virtual first, and then beyond that, they're trying to figure out what do they do with storage, what do they do with network and other components inside the infrastructure, how to tie those things together. Is
Satellite starting to look at containers or container management at all?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the major reasons I talked earlier about we basically re-platformed the entire product was because we wanted to be able to go through and take other types of content, other types of software, other types of formats besides just RPMs, which is what Red Hat Enterprise Linux is based off, and one of the driving ones was with containers. So with the most recent version we just put out in August, version 6.1, one of the things that we did was started to introduce container management, so you can use Satellite as an on-site repository for your images, for your containers.
Cool. What DevOps principles has Red Hat found to be most effective in building and maintaining high-performance teams?
I think DevOps is interesting because a lot of times, both internally when we talk about DevOps, and especially I spend a lot of time talking to customers, you start talking about DevOps, and a lot of people go right to the tools. Like, well, what kind of DevOps tools are you using? What can you do that? And what's more interesting to me is when you step back and say, I find that when a lot of organizations go straight to the tool talk, they're not successful unless they've actually had the organization and culture talk. Because if you can't figure out how to get the dev guys to actually talk to the op guys and have a common language and a common set of goals to make things happen, then if you jump straight to the tools and you're trying to automate and make that whole process work, it never actually gets better because you never settled on a common language, common culture, common set of responsibilities. And that's probably the biggest thing that I've seen, both internal inside of Red Hat, trying to get our dev guys and ops guys to talk together, but also when I talk to customers. If you don't get that first part, that common language, common goals that you're trying to attend, then the tooling doesn't matter. But everyone wants to talk about the tools, but it's really more about the people and the process.
Great, cool. Well, thanks so much, Chris. And next I'd like to introduce Dan Mitchell. Dan Mitchell is a business development manager at EMC. And he's got responsibility for defining the strategy and vision of EMC's enterprise hybrid cloud solution.
Right.
So thanks, Dan. Like the others, tell me about your role and what you do at EMC.
Sure. So I came over to EMC from VMware about 2 years ago. Really, there was an opportunity for EMC to kind of shift its strategy from doing just products to looking at, how could we build solutions that would be effective for our customers and be able to benefit them overall in a better way to consume those types of products and make more effective use of them.
Okay, cool. What are the key themes that EMC is hearing now, and what are the solutions and products that you are developing to address those?
So we hear from our customers a lot about agility. They want more agility. A lot of times we'll hear that they're struggling to really compete as the internal service provider, cloud service provider, to their application teams. So being able to deliver the infrastructure and be able to do that in the shortest period of time, be able to deliver it as a service with APIs, be able to execute on things like database as a service, apps as a service, and being able to get through all of that in really a modular format that's sustainable. These are really the challenges that we hear a lot from our customers. Yeah.
Okay. As the cloud guy, I mean, what are your beliefs with respect to the role that hybrid cloud plays for IT?
So hybrid cloud was really an opportunity, and I got to take a step back. It's not just, we use the term hybrid cloud, but the term cloud's overused overall, right? Cloud is really, it's a consumption model. It's not really a thing. Private cloud is the approach you take for the on-premises piece of it, enabling that so that you can go out to public cloud. That becomes the hybrid cloud aspect of it. But what we're really focused on is building out and responding to this customer ask around how can I stand something up in the shortest period of time to be successful. So we made a big investment in being able to deliver basically a turnkey private cloud, allow you to buy the cloud, and it's built on EMC Federation products. So VMware, EMC, VCE, all these types of technologies, leveraging things like vBlocks, being able to stand all of this up inside of 28 days, but give you all the enterprise attributes that you think of. So you think about in the enterprise, and a lot of people forget the importance of these things like backup, like continuous availability, disaster recovery, things that you need that infrastructure resiliency still for your traditional applications to sit underneath. So being able to build all of this and then leverage some of the other like VMware technologies, things like NSX for software-defined networking. We have a product called Viper for software-defined networking. So being able to kind of execute on that whole software-defined data center concept and knock out all that infrastructure as a service stuff so that you don't have to think about it and really make it sustainable so that on an ongoing basis, you don't have to rework your integrations. You can just pick those up from us and really focus on delivering on the applications above that infrastructure stack.
So private cloud in 28 days.
Yep.
How are you using any automation to achieve that, or?
So private cloud in 28 days is actually, it's part of being very prescriptive about it, because one of the things that we do to get to that very prescriptive model is we offer this one-call support, right? So you have to be prescriptive about what versions you have in there. We leverage technology like Puppet in the factory to be able to deliver some of our foundational components on vBlock. But to get to that, really, it's just about practice and execution. So it's roughly 2 to 3 weeks of figuring out what you have to deliver, and only about 4 or 5 days of actually installing and delivering and configuring this solution.
Sounds like a little bit of a combination of what Chris was talking about with respect to the mix of the people, and the tools and
Absolutely.
process. Cool. Tell us a little bit about the roadmap for EMC Federation Hybrid Cloud.
Sure. So, when we started this thing about 1.5 years ago, it was about how can we deliver on this promise of just infrastructure as a service, just turnkey, push a button, I get a VM. And then from there, we decided that the natural evolution was to be able to instantiate applications. So that became the next step. So leveraging integration with things like Puppet so that you could essentially stand up a complex multi-tier application with all the data protection around it. The next logical step beyond that is how can I then take my internally built applications and be able to establish these continuous delivery pipelines and then publish those out throughout this service catalog, so I have my commercial apps, my internal apps, all being published and managed throughout the life cycle throughout my service catalog from dev test to UAT to production.
Great. So how does Puppet play in then exactly with the Federation Hybrid Cloud, and what would our mutual customers come to expect?
Sure. So a lot of our common enterprise customers have already made a huge investment in Puppet. And as such, they already have core expertise around it, and they're adopting it as a way to deliver on these commercialized applications instead of just making all their investment in kind of the built-in capabilities of the VMware product. They want to leverage the Puppet product and then be able to tie that back in. So what we've done is we're leveraging the integrations that exist between the VMware product set with vRealize Orchestrator and some plugins that have been written by Puppet, tie that back into Puppet, so that it can then execute on, so basically install the agent, configure the agent, do the validation of the certificate, and then be able to take that class and then instantiate that on a set of virtual machines so that you can stand up the app on a consistent basis and then manage it from within Puppet.
Cool, great. So in what I've read, it seems like EMC is definitely on board with DevOps.
Yep.
What are you doing to enable DevOps practices and processes for your customers?
Certainly. So, most people think of EMC, the first thing they think about is spinning disk, right? And then the second thing they think about is, some of our software that we've done in the past. And so we've kind of evolved from that, and we've made a big investment in DevOps. So EMC kind of thinks of DevOps as kind of the modern iteration of IT, and as such, we've gone and built out some consulting services offerings that are around really technology and management, so that we can help kind of established organizations with large IT portfolios execute on the promise of DevOps and start to see that IT at velocity promise. So being able to help them out to rationalize the portfolios. We did a session today talking about Uber dependency hell and how do you solve for this in large enterprise. And you have to have the support from the top down and the bottom up to be able to affect the culture and the technology and all the aspects of it to be able to do that. And so we offer these services to be able to support these customers and establish how they can rationalize their portfolio with baby steps, maybe 1 or 2 applications and a couple of pipelines all the way down until they can eventually get all of it into pipelines and really achieve the nirvana of DevOps.
Cool, great. I know recently, we've announced a joint partnership.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see as the value in partnering with Puppet?
So a lot of times we'll go into these larger customers and immediately, they'll ask us, so what do you do with Puppet, right? I mean, they ask us about other technologies as well, but they want to be able to see, an elevated relationship. We talked a little bit about the one-call support. So literally, if you subscribe to this Federation Enterprise Hybrid Cloud concept and the solution, then you can pick up the phone and literally call EMC and say, my cloud is broken. And they will handhold and walk you through the entire problem resolution without just pawning you off to the different pieces and parts. Puppet becomes part of that whenever it gets included in the Federation Enterprise Hybrid Cloud solution as a whole. So now customers have a new level of comfort because of that partnership and being able to support that technology.
Great. Well, thanks, Dan. I appreciate your thoughts there.
Thanks.
I'd like to move over to Angel now. Angel Calvo is a partner software engineering director at Microsoft. He oversees the enterprise cloud group as the software engineering manager there. Angel, just like the others, tell us what you do at Microsoft.
Well, what I do, I have this amazing, job, which is working with a bunch of engineers who are responsible for delivering PowerShell, desired state configuration, as well as the management technologies that we use to manage either Windows or as well as Windows Azure. So that's probably my job. I'm pretty excited about that sort of job because all the conversations that we've been having here and the role that I think that we got to play as well, to help our common customers, through this amazing, transition into DevOps, what it means culturally, not just to our customers, but even internally to a company like Microsoft.
Cool. So you talked about Microsoft DSC, desired state configuration.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about how, the path to Microsoft releasing DSC. How did you get there?
Yeah, so I think the best way to think about it is that DSC for us is kind of like, DSC is for Windows like Puppet is for Linux. It's the best way to think about it. We knew that we needed to come out with an extension to figure out how we can basically deploy configurations of applications into Windows. And that really occurred to us that we could use something like PowerShell, extend PowerShell to actually accomplish that. So together between PowerShell and DSC, you have this automated process that enables to do exactly that. There are configurations that you want to manage the state of those configurations. So we use a very similar approach what Puppet did, and definitely we learned from that. We implemented in the Windows systems.
Great.
Yeah.
I know we're certainly using DSC, and people are starting to use it more and more. And people have been using SCCM for a long time. How do you see DSC and Puppet integrating together to provide automation for Windows?
Well, I think as you will say, I think one of the things that we already done, and tomorrow I will encourage people to actually attend. There is a session that Bruce Palin and as well as Ethan Brown is planning to do about DSC and Puppet integration. And it's pretty exciting because what we did, we actually realized that we have customers, they are running heterogeneous environments, right? Everybody goes to the tools. There are tools everywhere, and it's culturally, as the companies are transforming into DevOps, they realize that integration is a big pain point. And I think it is our responsibility, to provide, an integration solution. And I think that's what we started doing together. I think that definitely something that we got to continue in the future because I think it will benefit all of us in the end.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You could talk a little bit about how you see the role of automation in the cloud and how you see that evolving with Microsoft Azure.
Yeah. So when we're thinking about automation, automation for us is the primary ingredient, if you will, about the future of the cloud. Cloud, like you will say, it's kind of like this interesting, label that we put nowadays. But in reality, it's not just about cloud. It's about it's the infrastructures, it's the applications, it's the solutions that you got to go manage, that you got to deploy, you got to go configure. And in the cloud, because actually it's an interesting, you get some benefits. One of them, you get a scale. That's great. You can actually provide some very amazing tools for integration, but at the same time provides some pretty interesting challenge. One of the big challenges that we are having today at Microsoft is that how people go from on-premise into the cloud. How we're going to help that transition, how you're going to help the integration, both in Linux and Windows, regardless of what technology you're using. And this is actually one of the big challenges that we're going through. In Windows Azure, one of the things that we're doing is that we're definitely betting in technologies like PowerShell, because that's kind of our standard platform for automation. But at the same time, by doing this level of integration, like with Puppet, for example, I think we'll be able to provide what I would call a friendly integration ecosystem, where the people in the cloud, if you are in Azure or if you are in AWS, and it happens to be that you have Windows instances in AWS or vice versa, you have Linux instances running in Azure, that we got to provide some sort of common set of tools and technology to help our customers to do that level of integration. So I think Azure, the cloud for us, is definitely the place that we want to go and continue investing in moving some of the technologies that today we have in Windows, you move them into Azure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of other emerging technologies, we've started to hear some about Microsoft Nano server.
Yeah.
My understanding is it's a purpose-built, small footprint server for born-in-the-cloud applications. I also understand that management is to be done remotely with Microsoft Nano server.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how you see automation fitting in with Microsoft Nano server, and what do you see the role of automation there?
So the reason why Nano is becoming a reality is that we realized that we needed an operating system for the cloud. It's really about that. Nano is optimized for the cloud. So we realized that too, that through that process, we needed to take a different path about what was important. When we built Windows Server back in the 90s, it was all about building GUIs, making it really rich, all of the APIs, people love it, they build all these applications. It was awesome for those days. But as you start moving into the world that we are moving towards, we realized an operating system in the cloud needed to be an operating system that people could actually rely on, not only just from the availability, reliability, but also, do I need to patch it all the time? So we needed to reduce the patching footprint. So that's one of the main design changes that we did in Nano server. The other thing too, because we partnered with the Azure team in building Nano, we learned tons of tons of requirements, but as well experiences about what it takes to actually running an OS in the cloud. So another things that we realized, they said, well, if we want to enable a great automation, we needed to remove the GUI. Because one of the things that we realized that we put so much GUI in Windows that you end up patching Windows all the time. So one of the things that we decided, like, no, we're going to remove all the GUI. Any operation about management needs to be done remotely by using PowerShell, using DSC. And we are going to be developing not only just using a standard Microsoft WinRM protocol, but we're going to be having an SSH protocol as well. So you have the ability to actually connect to Nano using different standards. But ultimately, what we want to do is create a very small footprint of the operating system, highly reliable. You don't need to patch as often. We think that's our customers definitely are very enthusiastic about that direction.
But you'll have DSC hooks into Microsoft Nano server?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the principles for us for remote management is you can use PowerShell remoting, as well as using DSC is the vehicle for you to configure and manage the configuration of a Nano server.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Final question, I think then we can kind of open up to questions from the audience. So what DevOps principles does Microsoft and you as an IT manager employ to build and maintain high-performing teams?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think that we are going, even internally at Microsoft, through a transformation culturally. I mean, the culture in Microsoft is significantly changing from just 3 years ago. We realized that one of the things that we needed to enable is even an internal community within Microsoft, kind of similar to what an open source community is today. So one of the things that we are doing is going through that transformation internally with our development teams. They say, hey, we need to start becoming more focused on solutions, and less focused about building technology. So one of the things that we do is to really have our development teams working and partnering, as well with our program management team, with our customers. Basically, we created this concept of solutions teams that they are accountable for basically the entire process of a DevOps about, hey, what is the solution we got to go build? What technologies do we need? And then basically go build it together through the entire process. As a common goal, it creates pretty strong collaboration internally. And now what we want to do is apply the same thing externally. So one of the things that we do, and especially in my team, we start open sourcing a number of things. Like, you've probably seen it. We even recently, with Windows 10, we actually took one of the first open source projects called Pexter, which is a unit test framework for PowerShell. And we just released it in Windows, which is amazing. I mean, I know for you it's probably not quite as dramatic, but for us it was the biggest step, a complete different direction. I mean, can you imagine Microsoft 3 years ago doing this? Probably not. So definitely Satya has really helped us to make this sort of transformation and changes. Yeah, I think you're going to see more and more of that. Yeah, I think internally we start basically focusing a lot about what is the customer paying, right? What is the customer frustration in their day-by-day job, and how can we help them basically with our technologies, like technology of our partners, to provide them great solutions, right? Because at the end of the day, I think it is our responsibility collectively, to collaborate, to help our customers to do this level of integration. So,
cool,
yeah.
Great. So I really want to thank everybody up here for taking the time and joining us. I guess at this point, open it up for any questions in the audience for any of our panelists or speakers here. Yeah.
How would you compare your Nano server to the container concept?
So the question is, for Angel, how would you compare your Nano server to the container concept?
Yeah. No, good question. Nano server is the host OS. Within the host, we are actually, we recently announced this in the Ignite conference. We are actually building Docker containers with our hypervisor. So the solution is that you'll use Nano as the host, you will use the hypervisor of Windows, and then you can deploy Docker containers using Nano as the host OS.
So they've basically ported all the command lines, so Docker commands execute exactly the same on Windows.
Yep.
If you want to play with that today, you can actually go up to Azure and spin up a Tech Previews copy of Windows Server 2016 and play with the containers on that platform in advance of Nano.
Yeah. Just to echo this, we use the same interfaces and APIs, the Docker. So if you are familiar with Docker, you can basically apply the same concepts with the Nano containers, if you will. Yep.
Any other questions?
I think
They want
all
beer.
think they want beer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want beer.
They want beer and sandwiches.
Great. Well, thank you so much, guys. And
Thank you.
again,
Thank you.
look forward to seeing everybody at the party.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep.